Primary elections are just a couple of months away, and here in Massachusetts, 2 Democrats are hoping to unseat the man polls suggest is the most popular governor in the country. Jay Gonzalez served as Secretary of Administration and Finance under Governor Deval Patrick and CEO of a local health insurance company. Bob Massie is a longtime activist, former candidate for lieutenant governor, most recently served as the executive director of the Sustainable Solutions Lab at UMass Boston. They're both here for one last debate, discussion, whatever, before the Democratic State Convention begins tomorrow. And before we begin, let me save some of you at home some email time. This is not intended to be an all-encompassing debate of every major issue the state and you care about. Rather, what we hope is that you'll walk away from the next 20 or so minutes with a better feel for who both of these people are. Gentlemen, the rules are, there are no rules. This is not a formal debate, although we do have someone monitoring your speaking time to keep things relatively fair. Brevity is appreciated. Rhetoric is not. Deal? Should we go?
Got it.
Jay, let me start with you. Both of you guys believe the voters should not rehire Charlie Baker in November. Give me the one most important reason why they shouldn't.
Because he's not a leader. I mean,
what's the manifestation of that?
He basically approaches the job as, you know, where are we, what do we have, and what's the best we can do, instead of where do we need to be and how do we get there. Manifestation of it, we've got one of the worst transportation systems in the country. It's dragging Massachusetts backwards. We need leadership on this. We need a governor that's going to have a sense of urgency about it and fix it so that people can depend on it to get to work on time.
Why should he be fired, not rehired, whatever you want to call it, Bob?
Because we have enormous opportunities and we are missing them with every passing week. We need to work on transportation. We need to move to renewable energy. We need to renew our commitment to education across the board. We need to create single-payer health care. These are all major changes that would create prosperity in the future. This governor has shown no interest in any of them for 3.5 years. We simply can't afford another 4 years of that.
So I need you both to explain to me why, 70+% of the voters seem to think what he's doing is okay, and why at least 3 of your fellow Democrats here have positive things to say. Here they are.
To Governor Baker, we have worked so well together, and I really admire how you approach your work here in the Commonwealth.
We mentioned a whole lot of positive things that have been accomplished, I think, in his 3 years in office. I would agree with you that he's extremely popular governor.
Certainly, the governor's popular. He's popular here and in the legislature. He's popular in the Commonwealth, and I think that anyone who makes it to the final has their hands full. I think it's going to be a difficult race. I mean, particularly when you see the accomplishments he's laid out. There have been some incredible accomplishments.
Incredible accomplishments. So that was obviously the mayor of the city of Boston, former state senator Dorsina Forey, and Bob DeLeo, Speaker of the House. What are they missing that you guys are focused on?
Well, for one thing, they're involved in a Beacon Hill perspective. I come from outside Beacon Hill. Beacon Hill is fundamentally broken. It has not been willing to address these core problems. And I think also Charlie Baker's a fraud. I mean, the numbers that you talk about, when you break them down, you see 2 things. One is that most people say he is doing a somewhat good job. And that number, though, gets repeated. The second thing is there was a recent poll that shows he is simply not performing, barely 35% on the issues that really matter, on housing, transportation, opioid crisis, education, health care. So I think when we have the open debate and when he finally responds to public questions, this guy has never had a public town meeting. When he finally has to respond to questions, I think people are going to see that he's an empty suit.
With all those Democrats, hacks who are Walsh and DeLeo and Dorsina Forey, I mean, they're all sort of embracing him big time, even if they don't endorse him.
We'll see where they are by the end of this election. But, you know, it's easy to be popular when you don't do anything and you never take a stand, and your whole approach to the job is being cautious instead of courageous. And what the polling reflects is a bunch of people who give a half-hearted he's fine. And as Bob mentioned, the most recent poll actually asked people, do you think he's doing a good job on a whole series of issues? Not one where a majority of people think he's doing a good job.
That's a Mass Inc. BUR poll if people want to check that. Can we talk about what most of America is talking about these days, racism? And obviously we're far from immune in Boston. There was a stunning poll of people of color that was in the Globe Spotlight series a few months ago, where by a wide margin people of color said that Boston was the least welcoming major city to people of color. If you're governor, I assume working with the mayor of Boston, concretely, Jay, what do you do about this, including this stunning household net worth differential, $250,000 for a white family in Boston, $8 for a black family? Concretely, what do you do?
Well, these disparities are really discouraging. We can't tolerate them anymore. I would have a very ambitious agenda in this area. First, we've got to address all these issues that will lift up lots of people and will disproportionately impact and benefit communities of color.
Like what?
Like affordable child care and preschool, affordable housing, public education system, public transportation system that work for people. Beyond that, though, we need a very specific focus on helping to improve opportunities for people of color. One thing I would want to do is make state government a leader, and to lead it by example on this, I would appoint people in leadership positions across state government that reflect our community. I would ensure that any business doing business with state government has a board that reflects and is composed of people of color and is doing everything they should be doing to help improve opportunities for people of color.
What concretely would you do about that net worth differential, which I think is the thing that blew almost everybody away? And how do you make this a more welcoming city?
Well, there's two aspects of that differential. One is that we have a wage gap. So our wages are too low, and this is a structural problem. One of the things that I bring to the race is that I see these as all interconnected. So it's a structural problem with wages. We need to increase the minimum wage, and we need to push for wages to go up across. Then secondly is a wealth gap. And that means that people do not have enough money to own a home, to own a business. So ownership, developing and strengthening ownership for communities of color, low-income communities. Now, Jim, I just want to say, and I think you know this, I have been working on racial justice for my entire adult life. I wrote a long book on race in the United States and South Africa. I ran a program at UMass Boston that you mentioned that was about climate justice, working with communities of color who are going to get hammered by climate. So I think this is something I've dedicated my professional life to, and I would be a strong leader, encouraging white people to think about racism and not just always constantly
Should we be electing more people of color? I assume you both.
Absolutely.
Oh,
So
absolutely.
do you support Ayanna Pressley over Mike Capuano?
Well, I think she's a great candidate.
Do you support
I'm not
her?
supporting either one in this
Are
race.
you?
I'm very focused on our campaign.
No, although I know them both very well.
Okay. I'm going to talk.
Can I say, though, on
Yes,
this
of course,
issue that
Kim.
you were just raising, this is
Yeah.
one example among many where there's absolutely no leadership from Governor Baker. I mean, I think he appointed an African-American commission and has done nothing. No response on this Spotlight series that you described. Not doing anything on these issues that we're talking about to help lift up communities of color.
What have the Democrats on Beacon Hill done in response to that Spotlight series?
Well, they're at least trying to move forward in certain
what?
areas, like criminal justice reform is a great example. It is the biggest civil rights issue in our time. We're jailing way too many people for way too long. Governor Baker has provided no leadership on this.
He signed it, didn't
The
he?
legislature, well, he signed it reluctantly, and there was no leadership on it, and they got this done. And this is an example. Just think of what we could do if we had a governor in the governor's office that was actually leading on issues like this.
And think of what you could do if you had a governor who's been working on this for his whole life. I mean, I respect Jay. This is not an issue on which he has concentrated his professional life. I've worked on these questions for a long time. And I believe that this is also important to have a public conversation. The governor has the ability to put a spotlight, to convene people. I would ask all the communities in Massachusetts over a month and all our different institutions to have a conversation about race, to get at that issue of why we are not welcoming, what our bias is. I mean, those are things that we still have to root out. And it's not just race. It's also gender. It's also sexism. It's also the wage
Stop
gap
on
for
gender
women.
for a second. While we're doing better on the elective office front, the
Yeah.
number of women in C-suites and boards of directors is embarrassingly low
Yeah.
and not growing. Is there a role for government in either of those?
Absolutely.
What's the
Listen,
role?
I put out a 30-page set of proposals on women's equality
What's
and gender
government's
justice.
role? What specifically would
Well,
government?
one, first of all, to put a spotlight on this failure. I mean, it is not okay that week after week, month after month, year after year, you have these boards that do not have enough women. You have women who are not being promoted. You have a pay equity gap, which Boston is trying to tackle.
What do you do after you shine the light on it?
So then you look at the entire structures, wage structure, wealth, ownership, all of the things.
Is there a role for government?
Absolutely.
What is it?
Well, in addition to adjusting contracts, providing leadership from the governor in terms of hiring, working with the legislature to move forward on every aspect of this. This is something, it's an example of a structural flaw that we have continued to accept. This governor has done nothing about it.
Okay.
But I have to say, the legislature has a long way to go, too. The legislature is so enclosed upon itself that it isn't fully aware of the deep problems that are hitting the people of Massachusetts.
Quickly,
to
is there a
this
role
issue?
for government? What is it?
Absolutely.
Concretely, please.
State government needs to lead by example on this. I would do a complete review of wage disparities in state government and make sure, by an independent entity, and make sure that we close those gaps. I would make companies that do business with state government show that they're complying with our wage parity laws so that there isn't inequity in the way they're paying women. Child care and preschool. making it affordable for every child and family in this state. It is way too expensive in this state, most expensive state in the country. Most families can't afford it. It's usually the woman who ends up leaving their job because they can't afford child care, and they're postponing their career and income to the family when that's not their choice.
You've mentioned preschool a couple of times, Jay, and I know you both support universal preschool. You've mentioned transportation as a failing of the governor. You both support north-south. In fact, let's hear what the governor has to say about himself. This is at his State of the Union, State of the State in January, on transportation.
We have much more to do on the T, much more. But for the first time, the plan to modernize the system is in place and moving forward. Fixing decades of neglect doesn't happen overnight. But make no mistake, we will deliver the public transit system that the people of this Commonwealth deserve.
That's simply not true.
Well, if I may, let me just say, you mentioned preschool stuff. You both mentioned you support north-south rail, a whole variety of transportation initiatives. I did some math over the weekend. According to a liberal think tank, $1.5 billion a year for that universal pre-K. $3 to $6 billion for north-south rail. You both support single payer, many billions of dollars. Where does the money come from this, Jay Gonzalez? And then I'll get to you, Bob.
Savings from moving to a single-payer healthcare system. It's the biggest.
Vermont just dropped single-payer because it was too expensive.
Well, we can do it here in Massachusetts. We're better positioned than Vermont to do it. And if we do it thoughtfully, we should save money, and it is the biggest expense in state government.
Sports gambling part of the place to get money?
No, not for me. Criminal justice reform, we should spend less money on jailing people. But we will need new revenue, and it's why I support the millionaire's tax. I think it's the fairest, most meaningful way to generate new revenue.
And if it turns out either the SJC says it's unconstitutional or the voters reject it, where do you get the money from?
Then I will propose some other progressive way to raise taxes to pay for these important investments.
Like what?
Look,
what? What are they?
I haven't come up with a detailed plan, but I will. And it will be progressive so that we're asking those who are doing well to pay more and not asking those on the lower and middle income range to pay more.
So
let me say something.
Quickly, please,
Governor Baker says no more money. That's his overriding principle. Meanwhile, we have one of the worst transportation systems in the country. It's one of the reasons why Massachusetts just dropped from best-ranked state in the nation to 8th. We have an affordable housing crisis. He's doing nothing about any of these things. We're not only not making progress.
Democrats are doing something. They proposed $50 million in fees today because they're tax phobic. Did they go in the right direction?
Well, on those, I mean, to me, those are moderate, minimal issues.
So you're okay
we need
with
to be
it?
thinking much bigger.
Are you okay
we
with
need
it?
to be aiming higher. I support the increased fees for the Community Preservation
Let me get to Bob.
Act.
How do we pay for your plans? Also, billions and billions of dollars. Again, $1.5 billion alone
but
on this universal pre-K.
Jim, this is the wrong way to think about it.
How so?
A business person or a strong leader asks the following question: what do we really want? What would the benefits be? What are other people already doing in our competitor states or across it? What would the cost be of doing nothing? What exactly would the price be, and what would the finance mechanism be? This governor hasn't even bothered. What he said there was wrong. He has not moved forward on transportation. Everywhere I go, that's what people say they need.
But what are you going to say to the public? I mean, I hear your list of things that matter.
$6 billion from build-out, full build-out, by getting rid of the fossil fuel companies that are ripping us off, holding us back with fossil fuel. We could be moving to 100% renewable energy.
How long will that take?
If we to full build out, maybe 5 or 10 years. But this is the thing. We are holding the economy back by not moving forward to 100% renewable energy. We've had a governor who has broken down the process of moving forward, who approved a very modest and unacceptably modest wind program, who has been holding solar down.
The wind program that was just adopted?
Yes, it is pitifully
I read in the
small.
New York Times that it would
Pitifully
provide
small.
power for 500,000 households.
800 megawatts, which I can tell you is a small farm, and he has promised to move 10% wind over 10 years. This is
the headline in the New York Times is Massachusetts gains foothold in offshore wind power.
Gains foothold at the very time when we have a port in New Bedford, when we could be approving multiple projects. This is exactly what people have been pointed. We are losing out to the rest of the country and the rest of the world because this governor is so in the tank with the fossil fuel companies.
Can we talk
and with the Department of Public Utilities made up of his appointees who want pipelines, oil, natural gas at the time.
I want to raise another issue I think everybody cares about, and I know you two care a lot about schools and the gross inequity. There was a statistic recently that was frightening. Brockton spends $1.28 per student on classroom supplies. Weston spends $275 per student, 200 times as much. You're both nodding, so I assume you think that's a real serious problem. How do you fix the inequities? And again, how do you pay for the fix, Jay?
It is going to take more money. I mean, public education, making sure every child has access to a great public education is the most important thing we do collectively through government. And state government, as you were describing, is falling down on its constitutional obligation to adequately fund particularly lower income schools.
So what do you do?
This isn't just Brockton. It's all over the state. Teachers are being laid off.
What do you do?
We need to invest more in our system. I support the Senate legislation that was passed to do that. It's one of the reasons I support the millionaire's tax. And this is another example of an area where our public education system is letting down way too many kids. And Governor Baker has no plan. It's like it's not even on his radar. It doesn't affect him or the wealthy special interests who support him. And we need to help regular people.
A writer from Massachusetts once called this in a book, not here, but in Missouri, savage inequalities, which is what they are.
Yeah.
Well, how do you fix
First of all, we need to redo the proposal and formula that was done 25 years ago. That was supposed to correct some of these imbalances. For a lot of different reasons, it's now completely out of whack. It needs to be addressed. That's something that I have committed to, and as governor, I will move forward.
How much would that cost?
We don't know exactly, but here's the reality. The governor cut the money for Brockton. He reformulated the level at which people could have a reimbursement for breakfast. That ripped $8 million out of the Brockton school system, which is why they sued him. So we are coasting on the past, stealing from the future, with a governor who is proud of the fact that he hasn't done a single thing about this.
Amazon.
Yeah.
Amazon, I've heard you both say at a recent debate, I think if I get it wrong, please, I know you'll correct me, that it's fine, but we don't want to spend state money or tax money. Is that a fair statement to lure him here?
Well, I'm a little stronger than that.
Well, what is your position?
First of all, I was the first one to say that there was a problem with Amazon. Secondly, we need to think about taking that money that we want to give to Amazon and giving it to small business. Third, I don't know where we'd get those 50,000 housing units that we would have if they bring. That's when they said, well, in theory. Right. So I think it's just absolutely, it's part of the structural failure. We should be supporting local economies. I was head of something called the New Economy Coalition. We need to be putting that money in locally, supporting local business, supporting local municipal utilities, all the things that go from the bottom up.
But I want to be clear. So you're willing to write them off, essentially, because I just looked up this afternoon. Maryland has already offered them $8.5 billion.
That's absurd.
Yes. Newark, $7 billion. But essentially what you're saying with this position you both have is Amazon is not going to come to Massachusetts, and you're comfortable with that.
Yeah, I'd be surprised if they did.
You are comfortable with that?
I am, because, look, we've got lots of... look at this deal we did with GE. We paid them $125 million of state tax money for 800 jobs.
Those infrastructure. You don't support infrastructure for businesses?
They haven't even delivered on. But that's $125 million that could have been much more wisely spent to help support businesses that are already here, that are making decisions about investing and growing here, or for workforce training, or our education system, our transportation system.
And
our infrastructure that we have today doesn't adequately support the
15
economy
seconds.
we have today.
And this is at a time when Pittsfield still is fighting GE for $600 million that they have stiffed that city from.
You know, I have listened to a number of debates between you two, and I have to say, I'm stunned. It's like you're both running against Baker and not running against each other. You're bidding for a convention nod, and then in September, one of you will be the man standing. Is that because, other than the fact that he's an outsider and you have inside experience, his policies are fine, his temperament is fine, his character is fine? Is there anything wrong with him that I'm serious, that you've chosen not to talk about?
Well, first of all, thanks for listening to the other
I have watched every one. No, I'm serious. How are people supposed to choose quickly?
Bob's a great candidate, and if he becomes a Democratic nominee for governor, I will support him 100% because he'd be a hell of a lot.
But you don't think he should be the Democratic nominee?
Well, I do think I'm a better choice because while we agree on lots of issues and what we want to accomplish, my experience, leadership experience in state government, I think better positions me to deliver on the ambitious agenda we need.
So you're better, but he'd be fine?
Yes.
How about
I feel
him?
the same way. I mean, I think what's called for now is someone who has experience from the outside, a movement leader, somebody who understands Massachusetts' position in the global economy. I actually think it's an advantage that I don't have the same ties to the sort of whole Beacon Hill process. I think I can bring something brand new, fresh, and energetic for transformation.
Okay, we only have a half a minute left. You go first, you go second. Bully pulpit, a huge part of what a governor has. What non-statutory authority, in a non-statutory authority way, what issue would you champion from that bully pulpit as governor, which you couldn't affect through legislation.
A broad transformation of our economy towards sustainability, towards diversity, towards the economy of the future. We are being left behind by economies around the world. We are not even aware that we're being left behind, and that is setting us up for failure in the future at the very moment when we should be investing. So I think that's the core, shifting the conversation to the nature of our future economy.
Bully pulpit for you, Jay Gonzalez.
There are many in which our governor should be standing up to Donald Trump and fighting for the values and interests of people here. But if I had to pick one, I'd probably pick sexual assault and harassment in the Me Too movement. This is a sickness in our culture. We need leadership on this. We cannot tolerate the intolerable anymore. And we need a governor that's talking about this issue and holding people accountable.
Jay Gonzalez, really appreciate your time.
Thank
Good
you
luck on
very
Saturday.
much.
Hope to see you a lot during the
very
summer.
much.
Bob
Yep,
Massie,
take
you
care.
too as well.